Okay, today's lesson is focusing on radicals and operations with radicals. And today we are going to focus on doing things that don't have any variables in. And then next time we'll work the variables into our problems. Okay, so let's make sure we understand what radicals are. So if I talk about the square root of 36, my answer could be positive 6 or negative 6. And the reason is because 6 times 6 equals 36 and negative 6 times 6 equals 36. Oops. So we're looking for a number that we can multiply twice and get this answer under the radical. Now today we're going to be finding not only square roots, but instead of having the invisible 2 here like this one does, instead of in this spot they might have a 3 or a 4 or a 5, so forth and so on. But what we're going to find today is just principal square roots. So because we're just finding principal square roots, we're not going to worry today about the positive and negative. Later on, when we're solving, then we'll have to define whether there's a positive or negative. But as for today, we're just focusing on the principal ones, so everything's going to be positive. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is simplify square roots, and this you probably did a lot of in geometry. Now there's different ways that you can do this, but I like to make a factor tree because I think that'll help us as we move on to the next steps. So let's think about what goes into 45. Well, right away I think about 9 and 5, and 9 is 3 and 3. So once I get to the end and everything is prime numbers at the end, because I'm looking for square roots, because there's the invisible 2 here, I'm looking for groups of 2. Each group of 2 represents one number outside the radical. Anything not circled goes back underneath. So my answer is 3 square root 5. All right, let's try this again on number 2, 108. I don't know what goes into 108, but I know it's even. So if I divide it by 2, I get 2 and 54. 54 is even, so I get 2 and 27. 27 is not even, but I can do 3 and 9 and 3 and 3. So again, I'm looking for pairs. Each pair represents one number outside of the radical. Anything not circled goes back underneath. So my final answer is 6 square root 3. Okay, let's try this again on 300. Well, I don't know what goes into it, but 30 and 10, because if it ends in a 0, 10 would be 5 and 2, 30 would be 6 and 5, and then we've got 3 and 2. So I've got a pair of 5s and a pair of 2s. So each pair represents one number outside of the radical. Anything not circled goes back underneath, and so I get 10 square root 3. All right, I want you to pause the video and see if you can come up with how you would simplify the square root of 448. Okay, on this one I wasn't sure where to start with 448, so I just kept dividing it by 2 and worked my way down. Turns out I had 3 2's. Even though we think 3 times 2 is 6, that's not our answer because 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, so we get 8 square root 7. All right, now notice what is different on the next one. Instead of having that invisible 2, now all of a sudden it's a 3, and we're not taking square roots, we're taking cube roots. So now instead of looking for groups of 2, we are now looking for groups of 3. So let's see how this works. All right, so I'm going to do still going to divide it out the same way. So 162 divided by 2 is 81. So I get 2 and 81, 9 and 9, 3 and 3, 3 and 3. So I need a group of 3. That's the only other group I have. So the 3 comes outside. Anything that's not grouped up goes back underneath. And so this is 3 cube root 6. Make sure, and it's hard to remember, but you got to put that cube root symbol there. It's important. Okay, let's try this again on number 6. 32 would be 32 and 10, 2 and 5, 16 and 2, 8 and 2, 4 and 2, 2 and 2. So I'm looking for groups of 3 because it's the cube root. So outside I have a 2 times 2, and inside I have a 5. So this is 4 cube root 5. All right, over here on the last one, a lot bigger number, but it doesn't change the process. I'm going to divide it by 2. So I get 2 and 1029. Well, that's certainly not divisible by 2, so let's try 3. Oh, that works. I get 3 and 343. I can't do 3. 4, 5, or 6 won't work, but what will work is, and you just trial and error with your calculator, I can do 7. So I get 7 and 49 and 7 and 7. So outside I have the 1, 7. Inside I have the 2 times 3. So this is 7 cube root 6. On number 8. Number 8, now I'm taking, and on this one here, the 4th root. So now I'm not looking for groups of 3, now I'm looking for groups of 4. So let's do 486 together. So I'm going to do 486 divided by 2, which gives me 243. Let's see if 3 will work. Oh, it does. 3 and 81. 9 and 9. 3 and 3, 3 and 3. So here's a group of 4. That goes outside, and then inside I have a 2 and a 3. So my final answer is 3 4th root 6. Okay, I'm going to skip number 9 for right now. Let's look at we'll go to number 11. Here on number 10, you're looking for groups of 5. So on number 11, now we're looking for groups of 7. You probably guess what we can probably know what to do with this by now, but let's try it. So I'm going to divide this by 2, so I get 2 and 128. 128 divided by 2 gives me 2 and 64. 8 and 8. 2 and 4, 2 and 2. 2 and 2, but now I need a group of 7. There's 2, 4, 5, 6. 2, 4, 6, 7. Oh my gosh. Look at that. It's all 2s. The answer is just 2. Because there's nothing left over. All right. Let's see what we can do here. Now we're going to multiply. Now all of these we're going back to square roots that we're working on. So think about square roots now. When we multiply, we can multiply numbers that are both in the radical or both out of the radical, but we can't mix and match. So on number 1, 14 and 16 are both inside the radical, so I can multiply them together and I get the square root of 84. But that's not my final answer. I need to simplify it. So I know this is 2 and 42. And this is 2 and 21, and this is 3 and 7. So when I simplify this, I get 2 square root 21. Okay, let's skip over to number 3. Let's see what happens on number 3. So I'm going to multiply the numbers that are outside and the numbers that are inside, but I can't mix and match. So 6 times 4 is 24. Inside I have 5 times 15, which is 75. Well, I just multiplied 5 and 15, so I know that's got to work, right? So outside, the 24 is still there. The 5 comes out, but now the 3 is inside. So I have 24 times 5, and this is going to give me 120 square root 3. Okay, what happens if we need to square a radical? Well, if I square a radical, this is really 4 squared times the square root of 7 squared. Well, 4 squared is 16. But when you square a radical, it cancels it. It undoes it. So the square root of 7 squared is just 7. So I get 16 times 7, which is 112. Let's try one more of these. I'm really just squaring each thing. So 5 squared is 25. Square root of 3 squared is 3. And I get 75. Done. All right, now we're going to add and subtract. Well, you can add and subtract if you have the same number under the radical. So let's look at number 2. So on number 2, I have 7 square root 5 and negative 2 square root 5. They have the same number under the radical, so I can combine them. 7 minus 2 is 5, so this would be 5 square root 5. Over here, I have 8 square root 6 and negative 7, which would just give me plus 1 or plus square root 6. If you put the 1 there, that would be okay, but it's not required. So there's your answer. Okay, but let's take a look at number 3. What happens when you don't have the same number under the radical? Well, I can't combine them as is, so I'm going to have to simplify this and see what happens. Okay, so 27 would be 3 and 9 and 3 and 3, so this would be 3 square root 3. 75 would be 3 and 25 and 5 and 5, so this would be 5 square root 3. Now that they both have the same number under the radical, now I can combine them, so 3 plus 5 is 8, and I'm going to get 8 square root 3. Number 4. All right, before I can add them together, I need to simplify them. So 45 is 9 and 5, 3 and 3, so this 2 is outside, this 3 comes outside, and this 5 is left over. So this is 6 square root 5 minus 20 is 4 and 5, 2 and 2. So the 6 is outside, the 2 comes outside, and the 5 is left over. So I get 12 square root 5. Okay, let's do the last one. 24 would be 4 and 6, 2 and 3, 2 and 2. So that 7 is outside, a 2 comes outside, and the 2 and 3 are inside, so this is 14 square root 6. So the only things I can combine are the ones that have the same number under the radical. So 6 square root 5 minus 12 square root 5 would be negative 6 square root 5 plus 14 square root 6. Okay, let's try multiplying. So we'll do 2 of these and then we can be done. On number 6, first I want to multiply the square root of 3 times the square root of 3. Well, that really is a square root of 9, which is just 3, right? So that's 3. Negative 1 times square root of 3 is negative 1 square root 3. This is 5 square root 3. And this is negative 5. Okay, combine like terms. 3 and negative 5 would be negative 2. Negative 1 and 5 would be 4 square root 3. And that's our final answer. Let's try one more of these. 2 square root 7 times 3 square root 7. Well, 2 times 3 is 6. And the square root of 7 times the square root of 7 is the square root of 49, which is just 7. So this is 6 times 7, which is 42. Over here, 2 square root 7 times 2 would be 4 square root 7. This would be negative 18 square root 7, and this would be negative 12. So if we combine like terms, 42 and negative 12 is 30. 4 square root 7 and 18 square root 7 would be negative 14 square root 7, and there's our final answer. Same thing is going to happen on number 8. Now let's just practice the first part of it. The rest is pretty easy. I'm going to take 3 square root 5 times 2 square root 5. Well, 3 times 2 is 6. The square root of 5 times the square root of 5 is the square root of 25, which is 5. So this is 6 times 5, which is 30. And then you can keep multiplying. That's it for radicals today.